How's it going out there, people in the real world? Coming on here to talk about one of my books. This book here, Casino Joe. This book was created out of the love of my friends when I was in the Navy, and I had these roommates back in the day, which I always thought, hey, what if we all lived in Vegas, ran a casino, had these mini adventures like how James Bond has it, but in this adventure, the guy never gets the girl. He meets the girls, he meets gadgets, he meets enemies, meets people, but it's all about Vegas. And the way it goes in Vegas is it's just a fun time. I've been to Vegas in my life probably about 9 times. I haven't been there since 2014. It's just been a very long time, but I'm hoping to go there soon in the near future. Well, this book here, I had to pull it off the shelf because it was I had to retool it, had to make it better in some way, and I had to fix it to where I can release it on audiobook. It's going to come back out in a few months, re-released. My artist is working on the cover as we speak. Going to bring it back, same story, just had to change a few things out of the story, but I think you'll like it. Haven't come up with a full name yet for it, but it's going to be a good book though. And the other reason why I was coming on here was because my other book, The Boys of BG. As you can see, my baby picture right there. I still to this day don't know how I have orange hair. That's funny. I just finished writing the second book of it. I liked how it came out. I had 6 more adventures. Now, when I wrote this adventures, I mixed real life with fake life, and pretty much like a version like the Wonder Years, or I just changed a few things, added a few things. I had these 5 friends I grew up with. I'm not going to say their real names, but I'm still friends with all 5 of them. There's 6, but it's like the 5 main guys, and then the one guy that was extra, he's a funny character. But the reason why I wrote The Boys of BG, I wanted to reiterate some stories of the time when I was in high school. I want to talk about the first story. The first story, which is, it's called Graduation Night. As you can see, Graduation Night. Graduation Night for me, no lie, it was June 13th of 1997, Thursday. I remember it like it was yesterday, 27 years ago, because it was, we graduated in the afternoon. Well, we did the dry run in the morning, I remember. All my friends were there. We were excited school was over. It was coming to an end finally. And then I remember it was about 5 o'clock or so. We had the actual graduation. And the funny thing about that was, for the first time ever, all our parents got to meet each other, which was funny because we've been friends since like the 6th grade for almost like 10 years. And we never met each other's parents. Because when we hung out as kids, it was always one mom dropped the rest of us off, another mom dropped us off. Well, it was never like in passing saying, bye Mrs. So-and-so, bye so-and-so. You never said that because you didn't know. But we finally all got to meet each other's parents that night. And it was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool. Well, we graduated that night about, it was 5 something I remember. And then they told us that at 8 o'clock, come back to the high school, bring your car if you can drive, you can park it in the football parking lot, and we were all going to go to Disneyland, because back then, when you graduated high school in Los Angeles, you were able to go to Disneyland. So from 8 o'clock at night till like 5 in the morning, the whole park was just a bunch of teenagers graduating from high school. And to this day, they still do that, where every Thursday through Saturday, I believe, at California Adventures now. They don't do it at Disneyland anymore. They do it at the park across the street, where back in 1997, California Adventures did not exist. It was just a parking lot. That's all it was. So we got there, and what was funny was one of my best friends, which I made the story, and the story was just funny. The first story we talked about was the fact that we had the bro code, you know, that the bro code where you and your friend were like, okay, we're not going to ditch each other if a girl comes along. And at the same time, we had my other friend. I won't say her name, but she invited her other friend to hang out with us. So the four of us got there. Me and my friend were on one bus. Her and her friend were on another bus because everything was alphabetically typed. So we get there. It was all cool. And then I remember we got to our fifth ride, which was like Splash Mountain. And he met up with this girl who's a friend of mine to this day. We're still friends. We get there, and he tells me that him and this girl want to go off on their own. And I'm like, bro code, don't leave me, don't leave me. He left me. But it was okay. It didn't bother me. It bothered me that night because he said he was going to stay with me, but he left. So that was pretty funny. But after he did that, I hung out with the two other girls. We did every other ride. I mean, we went to all the rides, but my bro left me. And it was funny because we went on the first ride after he left me. We went to Pirates of the Caribbean. And I remember that whole ride where everyone's singing there was no Jack Sparrow then. This was 1997. Pirates of the Caribbean hadn't existed yet. But we go on the ride, and you know that first dip you take where everyone's all, wah. We take that first dip, and everything was great. And then we're seeing all the Pirates Life for Me, all the songs, Swashbuckling, all that stuff. And it was funny because me and the two girls, they sat on the right side of me, and I remember I'm looking in front of me, nobody's paying attention. Everybody's making out with each other. That's all they did. And I was like, did no one see this? And then my two friends, they're just talking all great at this ride. And I'm sitting there going like, that's funny. We go on another ride. You know, the canoe ride where you just pull. It's like, I think it's Tom Sawyerland or something back then. We're on that ride. And I remember we're the only three that were paddling, having fun. Everyone else around was making out. I'm sitting there going like, well, this sucks. I was like, same thing. Then we go on the ride, which is the Alice Wonderland ride. And I remember the same thing. We're in there going through all the stuff. And I see all the couples in there making out. I'm like, this kind of sucks. This is kind of funny too. Well, it was around 4:30 in the morning. We finally go relax. And I remember the two girls pulled their money together. And they had like a waffle cone or something. They shared it. And I remember I'm sitting there going like, eat your damn food. Whatever. This ride sucks. This night sucked. But it was funny because about 5 hours before this whole Disneyland thing was going on, my future first girlfriend, we worked together at a restaurant. I won't say the name of the restaurant, but they had a slogan years ago, which was $5, you know what. So before we went to Disneyland, I met up with her at the restaurant, and she gave me a gift card, and it was for $10. $10 back in 97 was a lot, because I remember at Disneyland, we were there at Disneyland, and while the girls were stuffing their face with the funnel cake, I got something myself. Then I saw one of my five best friends. He was hanging out with his other friends. He sees me. He goes, "Why are you so down?" I'm like, "You know who left me?" He's like, "I knew he was gonna leave you for some girl." And I said, "Yeah, whatever." He's like, "Well, your night's over." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "It's 5:00. We gotta get back on the bus in 30 minutes." I said, "Okay, cool." So then everything was going. All those teenagers were walking back on the bus, and everything was great. It was funny. Then my friend, the one who ditched me, was, you know how buses back then had, like, let me describe it for you. You know that padding they have where you all gotta stand your face and you're just like this? Well, his face was like this, like half asleep. And I didn't mean to, but when he did that, I was like, whack! And he woke up. And his face was all drool. And I said, "How's it going?" He's like, "Oh, what's up, man?" I said, "No, I'm just seeing how it is." "You have a good time?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "You did?" And he looked at me. He wanted to say he was sorry. I know he truly did. But we're teenagers. But I was heading on the 19. He was at 18. Reason why I was going to be 19 was because I liked third grade so much, I had to redo it again. As my one friend said, he said, "How do you redo Crayola?" And I said, "I remember when I was in the third grade, I did a lot of standards for some reason. But it's okay, because if it wasn't for going backwards one grade, I would never have my five best friends," and that was it. Now, that was a true story, but I changed it around in some ways to make it funny as a regular story. But that's the first story. The second story, which was Intro to Manga. Now, manga, or how you call it, one of my daughters, She says it perfectly, and always tell myself, how come I never said it that way? Well, manga for me back in the day was like the classics, like Ghost in the Shell, Wicked City, Ninja Scroll. What else was there? Lupin. What's that one? I think it's Golobo, or the spy or something. Gundam. Well, it wasn't. I grew up watching it because I grew up like every Mexican kid in LA. We all grew up watching Speed Racer, which was pretty cool. When I went to Anime Expo 4 months ago, oh man, I saw this guy who was perfect outfit as the Speed Racer, but I didn't take a picture with him. I'm hoping the next expo I go to, I get to take a picture with that guy. Well, in Intro to Manga, the main character, him and his best friend, which is a basis of the best friend that I have right now to this day. Been friends with the guy since 1995. We've been friends that long. Well, Intro to Manga, the story is about the main character has this friend. They're just talking one day, and his best friend says, "Have you ever played that game Street Fighter 2?" And if y'all remember, back when Street Fighter 2 came out on Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, it was a huge big deal. I remember the game was like $69 because you had to put so much like RAM or whatever into that video game. My mom still worked at Toys R Us. I don't know how much money she saved or how many paychecks, but she bought me that. I had the big cardboard thing, you know how it's on the side, Super Nintendo. Well, the idea came to me in 2021 when I'd been thinking about this for like 4 years. I always tell my friends, I say, there's all these cool high school stories, adventures we had. Why not write about it? And then that's how I came up with this idea. So the whole story about this is about the guy's best friend said, "Have you ever played Street Fighter 2?" And he said, "Sure, I have." He goes, "Well, I had it, but my other friend took it, never gave it back to me." And back in the day, you didn't have a red box. You didn't have streaming services. If you had the newest video game, you borrowed it with someone else, and they swapped games with each other. You gave it back to them. It was like a code where they're like, "Oh, you have Zelda. I have Russian Attack. Can I borrow Zelda?" And you borrowed Zelda. He borrowed Russian Attack. To this day, I'm the only guy I think I've ever known where I lent out my game Russian Attack, which was a great game on Nintendo. I lent that game out to my friend. He lent me Zelda, the first Zelda, the gold cartridge one and all. Then he moves. They tell me, he moved out. I was like, what? But the Zelda game that I had, his version that he lent me, it had a dysfunction in the cartridge where the game didn't save. So if you had to play that game, you had to play it in one playthrough. And I played the game, like, I think it was 2005 or 6. Do you remember when Game Boys had those small little Game Boy cartridges that flipped open like the Razr phones now? Well, they brought their old NES collection, they called it. It had Castlevania, it had Zelda. There was this thing called, if you remember back then, it was called Game FAQs. And it had, you print it out of the printer. I mean, me and my daughters, we print out so much of those game guides before YouTube came out and all that stuff. And it'll tell you step by step. Well, it told me on Zelda how to beat it finally. I beat it, and I had a tear in my eye. And my ex, and it was funny because my partner at the time, she said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "I finally beat it after all these years. It was so great." And it's funny now because it was a funny moment years later. And I wish I had that still. Well, that's what the whole story was. Manga, and this character introduces this character about all that stuff. To this day, the first Ninja Scroll movie, still great movie, still great anime movie. Alright, that's a preview of that story. Third story of the book, which was, when you're 18, there's only one place you can go. And I don't think I need any captions for this, because when I was 18, all my friends were 18, which was pretty funny that my 6 best friends, all our birthdays was from May, June, July, August was mine, September, October. It's like for some reason God put all 6 of us in that time frame. We all turned 18. So at that time we all turned 18, which was pretty cool. we all went to the, you know what, they call it what, gentleman's club, whatever. And the whole story of this is based out of one of my friends. Everything was fine. The story was fine. Everything was good. But one of the characters learned one lesson: never leave a paper trail or a debit card. Because remember, back in the day, smartphones didn't tell you what you spent your money on, what the bill was. Well, back then, when debit cards were first coming out and you're first 18, you're like, oh, I got a debit card. And you spent stuff by swiping whatever it is. Then you get the bill where it says where you spent it at. And that's one of my friends got in trouble for that. And that's what gave me the idea for the third story. Now the fourth story, it was getting a license. Now this was a fun story. This was well, if you ever watch that show, My Two Dads, I had three. I had a real dad, I had a stepdad, I had another guy. I can call him a dad now because he was kind of like a dad in a way. But I had three dads, which is pretty funny. Back then it was really confused with all three, but it was funny. Well, getting a license gave me a story. If you remember the 1987 film License to Drive with Corey Haim, well, it was a favorite film of mine. There was an idea when I was in what was it? Well, I got my license, but to get a license in LA in Bell Gardens, it wasn't hard. It was not like in the movies where there's a computer and you press your questions. This was Bell Gardens. That DMV still exists to this day, and I'll take a video of it when I go down to LA, and I'll show you guys that this is still the same place that I took my license. Well, the funny thing about the real story about this, about getting a license, was the fact that my father, stepdad, he had this thing where he didn't want to. He felt like if he controlled me enough, it stopped me from doing anything. Because years later, I realized, I'm 45 now, but at the time I was 17, 16. He didn't think of this stuff. He was alone. He wanted someone to hang out with. I tried everything in my power when I was a kid, because he worked nights in a grocery store. So in the daytime, he was awake, went to bed at 10, and went back to work at 6. When I got home at 3 or had a day off, I didn't want to talk to him because I'm like, I want to go to my room. But I didn't have a room. I slept on the living room with a couch, which was another story I'll tell later in life. But he had this control over me where he just thought, well, if he never gets a license, he always depend on me to take him somewhere, which he never took me anywhere. I either took the bus or my mom would have to sneak the car with me to go somewhere, which I thought was pretty funny at the time. Well, when I finally convinced him to let me have my permit, to take the test, it was funny because like 8 of my friends, we all took the test. There was no computers. It was this long scroll paper. It looked like a scroll, pretty much. It looked like a scroll, like the Ten Commandments. Well, this paper had 50 questions on it. But what they did, I don't think they thought this through back then. But what they did was the paper had all these questions, and if you got them wrong, they let you take the paper home with you. Well, all my friends had the same paper, and we all looked at it, and we're all like, wait a minute, the questions are rearranged. So, I'm admitting this right now because this really happened in my real life. When I took my test again after I failed it the first time, I wrote down all the answers on my hand, which I knew where all the questions were going to be. Like I put like if question 4 said if you drive, then I knew what question that was, what was the letter. So I drove all that and figured all the little hacks inside there. So when I took my test, I was like, okay, I know that. So I took those answers and I passed my test. So we all did that. We all got our permits. And I remember I called the day I took my license, which I put fake story in the story, but the real version of me getting a license was funny because the first time I took it, it was a nice hot sunny day in LA. Have you ever heard that song, It Never Rains in LA? It's true, but sometimes it does. Well, this time it didn't rain, my first test. the lady who's giving the test, she was so snarky. Like, she was just so angry for some reason. I was like, what's she mad about? But I did the thing left. I did the right signal. She was just like, I knew the pen, and she just gave me that look like, ugh. And I was like, well, what is your problem, lady? So I thought it was funny. It was no big deal. I knew I was going to fail the test, so when we drove back to the DMV, I drove past the entrance, and she goes, we passed it. I said, oh, we did? I did it on purpose because I knew I was going to pass. I pull in, and she goes, how you think you did? And in my head, I wanted to say, you know how I did, so don't even try to comment like you're going to tell me no, I passed. She failed me. And you had to wait like 6 weeks, I remember. And I told my friends, I was like, oh, I failed. Two of my friends at the time, two of the six passed their license. It was good. They passed it. Then comes the funny part. 6 weeks later, my stepdad drives me there again. I'm sitting there going, hopefully I pass it this time. Hopefully I pass this time. I get to the test. I get there, and this guy, it was raining that day. Of all times in the world, it was raining. He gets in, pulls the seat back, puts glasses on, and he looks at me and he goes, oh, bro. He goes, it says here, oh, you failed the test, right? So you know the route, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, good. He goes, I'm so tired. I'll tell you more of the real story in the book if you read it, or get the audiobook next time. It'll be an audiobook in 2 months. Well, he just looks at me and he goes, just the PG version of it I'm giving you. He goes to me and goes, oh, I'm so tired. I was with someone. I'm so tired. He goes, you know the route. Just wake me up when you're done. I looked at him like, seriously, you just said that? And I did the route. I remember I sat there with a car and I was just like, he's still sleeping. What is going on? I did the whole route. It was raining. Got on the freeway, which, if you've been to Commerce, there's that one freeway right by the AMPM, right where it splits Commerce and Bell Gardens. I get there, and I'm just like, okay, he's not going to wake up. He never woke up. I did the whole route like he was watching me, but he was like this, and the chair passed out. I'm like, this is really happening. And I remember we got back to the DMV, and I looked at him, I go, excuse me? And he goes, oh, I needed that nap. He goes, thank you so much. He goes, how do you think you did? He goes, here you go, you passed. Welcome to the real world. I'm like, did he just pass me? He passed me. I remember it was like the only time in my life I ran into my stepdad's arms and I said, I passed. Oh my God, I passed. I didn't tell him that story. I didn't tell my mom. I told nobody what happened. I was like, no, I'm not going to tell anyone what happened. Then years later, I told the story. And I remember I told my significant other at the time, and she said, they should have failed you. How dare them do that? And I said, that was a moment in time. It was so funny. But that was inspiration for getting a license. Now, the next story. This was my favorite story. This story. Dalia Nuff said. Okay. Now, if any of you guys know about Mexican music artists or Mexican American artists, I grew up with Selena. Well, the sad part about that is after she died, it seemed like everyone in California knew who she was now. And I was like, we never listened to her music, but then when she got Dreaming of You comes out, everybody loves that song. Everyone loves that artist. But at the time, there was this girl named Thalia. I listened to a few musics of her, whatever. There was no YouTube, but when you lived in LA, either anywhere you went, you can drive with your windows down and you hear the best Mexican music outside and the best taquerias everywhere. And it was great. Well, the story behind the Thalia was back in I think it was 95. If you remember, these are for all my peeps who went to Bell Gardens High School. Shout out to everybody. Well, back in 95, there was a class right by our history class. It was like a small little class, but that was where all the pregnant women who got pregnant in high school would go to. I think it was called like continuation class or something. Well, they went to that class during like 10 to 1 or something. They went during the time where they were in class, so when everyone else was going to that class, They went to that class for 3 hours and they went home because I guess the school didn't want to show that. Yeah, the pregnant girls in our school were still going to school, but you don't see it. But what was funny to me was whenever we went to class by there, when that pregnant class got out, like I think it was like noon when they got out, and a new girl came out. Every guy was like, "Oh man, she's pregnant. Oh man, why her?" They always would get that look like, "Man," and I was sitting there going like, "What do you care? You're not with her. Like, what, you all of a sudden notice her?" And that's part of that thing now, being older, when you always say, "Shoot your shot, dude. Don't sit there and go, well, I hope she likes me eventually." No, ask her and say, "Would you like to go out with me?" She says no, then ask the next one you want to ask. Don't sit there and go, "Well, I'm just going to dream about her every day and hopefully she likes me." You can't manifest her to like you. But this was 1995 and it was pretty funny. Well, there was this girl in, it was 95, I remember I was a sophomore. Her real name, she's not even in my yearbook, so I don't even know what it goes. But her name was Anna something. I remember it was Anna something. But this girl, how would you say? She was this short, like 5'1" girl, but she wore like these heels that were like so tall. And every time she walked, you hear the clap, and you're like, how does she walk? Because she always walked from home to school, and I'm thinking, damn, her legs must hurt just walking the whole time in heels. And I remember one of my friends, a girl, should say, "Well, you gotta sacrifice stuff to wear them heels." And I'm just like, okay. And she always wore the same thing. She always wore like a regular white top shirt and a black skirt and black heels. And I remember she had this boyfriend. This was when the Mustang had just changed from their old, like, Steve McQueen Mustang to the new version of the Mustangs when they had like the bigger round backs. Well, I remember it was like a purple Mustang this guy had, and I remember he was always picking her up or dropping her off, or sometimes she was walking at enough distance and then he pulled up to her, because there were no cell phones back then, so it wasn't like she said, "Oh, can you come pick me up?" It was like, "Oh, I see you, come get in the car." I never knew who this mysterious guy was. But I remember when I was a junior, we had class together for PE, and I remember she was always quiet, and she would talk to me. And this is a true story. I put that in the book because I thought it was funny. This is a true story now. Now, it had rained the night before, and my best friend Carlos, he was there. He witnessed the moment, which made the whole school witness the moment, which is pretty funny. He looked at me and he said, and I remember he just looked at me because I was looking at her. I was talking to her about something, and I turned to the left of the bleachers, and my foot like slipped, and like she grabbed my hand, and I slipped, and I rolled down the bleachers. I remember it was like 4 bleachers, and I rolled down. I didn't break my face, nothing. Like, I guess one of those Wonder Year moments. I just rolled down the thing, and I remember Carlos looked at me. He told everyone, he goes, "Dahlia just kissed him. He fell down. It was too much for him to handle." And I was like, "What?" I go, "She never kissed me. What?" But that was what he said, and everyone in school was like, "What, Dahlia?" And this girl was very quiet. Well, I didn't know she lived by me. When I'd go home, I had my dog Benji, his little Lhasa. He lived from 1986 to 2005. We took him to the doctor one time. They gave him a shot, and the doctor said, "Is he married? Does he have any kids? Does he live a stressful life?" My mom said, "No. He runs the house and he's normal." And the doctor said, "That's why he lives a long life. He has no stress." I thought it was funny. Well, I took Benji out one day, and Benji, my dog, he would literally sit on the grass while me and my friends would play football on the street. If you ever watch Wayne's World, when that scene with the hockey where they're like, car, that always happens to us. We played baseball on the street, played football. My friend Munchie at the time, shout out to Munchie. I won't tell you his real name, but his name was Munchie. He was a great friend of mine. Well, Munchie, if you remember back in the day, I think this was like after John Elway was like this popular star. Well, they had these Nerf balls. Well, like you could be the worst person who could throw a ball, but the Nerf ball was sized where you can just like launch into space. And I remember Munchie had this black Raiders one, and me, him, and two other guys were on one team, while this other guy was on the team. And he just launched the ball to me. And I remember one time I'm just getting ready to go for a hike. Like, you're standing there, you're like, hike the ball. And I remember Benji was looking at me like, what's saying something? I'm like, come on, Munchie, hike the ball. And no one would hike it. I go, what's the problem? And I look to the right, and I see Dahlia, Anna. She's walking it, and you see her heels clapping when she's walking. I go, oh, hi, Anna. And she said, oh, hi, Raul. We were talking for a second. All my friends, that was one time I ever saw when all my friends' mouths just dropped like, oh my God, you're talking to her. And I was like, what's going on? After she left, then that Mustang came like 20 feet later, picked her up, and they were like, you know that girl? Everyone's like, I'm like, yeah, she's in my high school. She never graduated. I never saw her. I think she was class of 96, but she never graduated or nothing. It was something I always wonder like, what happened to her? Well, that was my story of Dahlia. And then, of course, years later, like 3 years ago when I was in LA, one of my best friends tells his wife saying, yeah, this is the guy that fell because Dahlia kissed him. I said, that's not true. But everyone tells the story differently. And it was hilarious. I thought that was the funniest part of them all. I thought that story was funny. Now, the last story of this story, go to that. It was... Remember... No, not that one. Go to the last page. Oh. Where is it at? Dahlia, friends over... Ah, yes. Friends over love. This story was funny. It was another Star Wars funny, but this is one of those stories where this was I a junior? No, I was a senior. If you remember in high school where you had these well, as a guy, if you were a freshman, you never got to date a girl because all the girls who were freshmen, sophomore, or junior would always date a senior or a junior because they had a car. And me, I wasn't good looking. I didn't think of myself as a catch to women. My whole goal in high school was to get my diploma. I wanted to make my mom proud. My mom did a lot raising me. I mean, when I was a kid, my dogs were my alarm clocks because they slept in the room with my mom. So whenever she opened the door, like at 5 a.m, they all run to me when I'm on the floor sleeping. They all run to my ear, and I'm like, y'all want to go outside? And they all run to the door, and I let them out. And I'm like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. I gotta get ready for school. Have cereal, walk to school. Now, I went to 2 schools in the area. It was a Bell Gardens Intermediate. It was to the right. That wasn't a far walk. But to the high school to the left, that was a far walk. When I got my car 3 years ago, and I was living in LA, I drove to my high school. I wanted to see how far was it from driving there and driving back. On my car, it said 2.4 miles both ways. I'm like, I walked 5.8 miles every day? That's what kept me really skinny. And I never ate school lunches because my parents never gave me any lunch money. I don't know what the financial situation was. I didn't care. All I cared about was getting through high school, going through it, done. But then what was funny about it was the fact that years later, you know, people would say that story like, oh, I walked 10 miles to school. I sit there, I'm like, 5.8 miles was a long time. Well, at this time, I was a senior, and I was in those, you know how those elective classes you get where you got to get extra classes, extra points. Well, I was in this class. It was like an art / like movie class. Our teacher, his name was Mr. Tice. I always wonder what happened to him. I want to look him up someday and say like, how are you doing, dude? You were a great inspiration for my writing. You're a great inspiration for my video skills. Like at the time, I think it was 95, Rumble in the Bronx came out with Jackie Chan, and just all those moves and all the stunts he did We did some of those stunts in the classroom, and I'm surprised I didn't get my head busted open or nothing. But there was this girl in there. I won't say her name, but she was like, we just started chatting, and it was so easy to chat with her. And I remember I got her. I just asked one day for her phone number, because remember, in high school and middle school, there was no cell phones back in '97. There were no cell phones. Asking the girl for her number was a big deal, because you got her number, great, you got the number. But after you called her house, you were hoping her brother, her mother, her sister, or dad wouldn't answer. Because if her brother answered, he'd be like, "What do you want to talk to her for?" And you're like, "Seriously, dude?" Or her dad answer, "¿Quién eres? What do you want?" Like, you're like, "Oh, what? Can I talk?" Or the mom, "Can?" And you're like, what? They're like, "Can I just talk to your daughter? I just want to talk to her." It was like pulling teeth. But this girl, like, I had a fight with the phone with my sister, because my sister, for some reason, we had just got the two-way line. Remember how the two-way line just came out? And times my sister was on the phone, which is rarely, because I don't. She had the party line. She always wanted to talk to people for some reason. I was like, "Why? Who are you talking to?" So I got this girl's number. We started talking every night. Like, we just talked at night about nothing. Then we went to school. We had class here. Talked and talked. But we never walked around class together. We never, like, held hands or nothing. And I think it was because my one friend, still friends with the guy to this day, he was he made a Star Wars reference. It was a making fun of reference, which was messed up. But he didn't want, I didn't want to be seen around with her, which was so dumb. We were kids. We got to the point where at this time I already had my license. So my stepdad was gone and my mom was home, and I said, "Mom, can I go to their house?" Because she lived by BGI, right by the Bell Gardens Casino. I said, "Mom, can I go to her house?" My mom never questioned and said, "Why do you want to go to her house? Why are you going over there?" My mom knew why I want to go over there. But it wasn't like that. It was all PG. I went to her house, and in LA at nighttime, it's never cold unless it's like 2-3 in the morning, really, really cold. So we went there, and I remember we just sat there and talked about whatever. Talked about life, talked about the future. I told her, well, I joined the Navy a year ago, but it's now set in stone that I turned 18, so now I did the oath and everything else. And she said, oh, we just talked, and she was a sophomore at the time. We talked, and it was great, and it was a great time. But in my story, I had to change stuff around and make it was messed up. I mean, because I learned one bad lesson, one lesson out of this. I learned the fact that once you break up with somebody, all her friends are now your enemy. Everyone hates you. And I was like, man. And I had to break up with this girl all because my one friend said that was making fun of her. My other 5 friends, they didn't care. I remember they gave me a look sometimes like, you like her? I remember I brought her home to my house one day to hang out with her, just go in the bedroom and talk. And I remember my dog Benji looked at her and he was like, "Jesus, man, what the hell?" And I was like, "Really?" And then my dad looked at her, and my dad smoked in the house. I remember he smoked a cigarette, and he looks at her and he goes, "What the hell?" And I'm just like, my God, people, she's not that bad looking, but people were cruel back then. But what was funny was, like, years later, like 20 years later or whatever, or 5 years later, I remember I just typed her name in one day on Facebook, and I saw she had a husband, 3 kids, and it was like a family photo. And I remember her husband's face had this face like he was the happiest dude in the world. And I said there, I go, "You go, guy. You go, guy." And that's my introduction to my next coming book, The Boys of BG. Let me go close so you can see what it looks like. Now, of course, the back, I don't want to put trademark stuff, but I'm sure you all aware what those places were. In my next adventures, Boys of BG Part 2, it'll be coming out in September or October. I continue the story. I asked some friends if I can draw their picture in the back of the book so they can see that, yeah, all of us in high school. I had a great time in high school. I enjoyed every minute of it. I hope sometime in the future I can take pictures or take videos of me in the high school and showing that this is where my classes were. This is where I went to this. The only regret about high school, I don't regret a lot. Like, my only regret was when I was a freshman, I was having a hard time at home, and I joined the football team, but I quit 2 weeks prior to the season starting. I remember my teacher, the football coach, he asked us, he said, I won't get rid of anybody, but I don't have to let you play. And of course, back in 1993, that's messed up for someone to say, but it's his way of saying I have a backup to the backup if someone gets hurt. But there's no rule that says in the book that I can let you play. And at the time, I was like 5'1", so I was like, I wasn't that big, so it wasn't a big deal. That's my only regret, is that I wish I had stayed long enough to just go through the football season and just see how it was, because I've seen so many friends over the years when they were in football. I watched them from freshman to JV to varsity, and I was like, oh, that's great. I just wish I had been on the sidelines and get to actually watch a game played. Like, I never saw a football game played. Never in my life. And I think it was because the grudge of the ninth grade and going, I should have watched it. Well, that's my story. Hope you guys liked it, and give a like, and if you want to buy the copy, sure enough, in 2 months it'll be an audiobook. Thanks for your time.